Did you know Ahsoka was meant to be the next hero released for Battlefront 2? DICE had prototypes of her motion captured animations, but since the game was cancelled, they just repurposed some of them to the ISB agent from the final Scarif DLC, which holds the two blaster pistols like their lightsabers, but just like how other hero releases always had a good and bad theme to them, they were also planning on releasing Asajj Ventress as a counter to Ahsoka, which is so fitting since the last prequel heroes we got were both their teachers, though DICE wanted to add a lot more blaster heroes after this. As seen from General Grievous's unused voice lines, they were clearly planning on adding Padme in the game.
Senator Amidala, I presume.
There was also a rumor that the ISB agent's face is actually Padme's with just a scar, but this hasn't been confirmed, so I don't know, what do you guys think? Plus, it would have been pretty easy to add her in since Leia's adventure skin is actually the same one that Padme wore in the Clone Wars with just a different color. And since there's always an opposite hero theme, they might have added Jango Fett as a counter since he was in the concept art of the game. Plus, DICE developer Mats Helge on Reddit said that Sabine was intended to be the light side counterpart to Boba Fett, plus Rex and Cad Bane were also on their list, but to his knowledge didn't get past the discussion phase. Although the Clone Wars content we got was the devs pushing for it since they knew what the fans wanted, content tie-ins to the films were more easily okayed by EA, since it was financially more appealing. But you're probably wondering then, why did we get the BB droids as the final hero releases? Well, EA didn't actually push for these heroes specifically. In fact, Poe Dameron was originally intended to be the new blaster hero for this update, since Rey and Finn were already in the game, which would have been fitting considering we already have his Starfighter, but the character's actor, Oscar Isaac, never got back to them for recording voice lines. And since the dev team size was getting smaller for the cancellation of the game, the BB droids were a last minute backup plan. This was also the reason why they couldn't finish the original trilogy capital ship interiors in time for the game's final update. EA also didn't approve a development extension, which led DICE to change the game mode's name to just Supremacy. Dennis also said in a now deleted tweet that they had a Mustafar prototype in the works along with Ahsoka and Ventress. But since it would have only been a HVV and Hero Showdown map, the team prioritized other planets that could be used with more than one game mode at the later ends of its live service. But a lot of people felt that Felucia should have been replaced with Coruscant instead since it was barely seen in the TV shows and films. Plus, you could split the map from a Jedi Temple phase for smaller game modes to a street level for capital supremacy. But sadly, just like Bespin in Battlefront 1, the map would have had too much memory issues on the current gen hardware at the time, since everything would have to look hyper realistic. And apparently no one on the dev team wanted to make Coruscant for this reason. Felucia also started out as a small pitch in a dev jam, which is usually a meeting where devs throw around new concepts for fun and try out new tech. Plus, since the team was really small and were all really passionate about the idea, they ultimately chose to go through with it, which is really cool since no one expected to get Felucia at all. If anything, Utapau would have been a more probable planet from episode 3. Other maps like Dathomir were also concepts thrown around to go with Ahsoka and Asajj, most likely as a Heroes vs Villains map, as well as Umbara for the bigger game modes later down the line. But since they created storylines for each big battle in Galactic Assault and Capital Supremacy, it didn't make sense for clones to fight droids on the map since it was never shown, meaning they would have had to create an entirely new faction for the one singular map, which is why they eventually cancelled this idea. The Umbra skin for the ARC Trooper might be the only reference to this map in the game, but this isn't confirmed. Speaking of which, there was a few skins cut from the game, like the C-3PO skin for Chewbacca that could easily have been done since they already made his model, but was too expensive to hire Anthony Daniels as a voice actor. Also, the Imperial Jump Troopers used the ones introduced in the Rebels TV show, which is technically their canon appearance. But there was an unused Imperial Sky Trooper skin found in the game's files, as seen from the channel Mophead's video. These troopers were originally introduced in the 2011 Disney exclusive toy set that showed off Imperials with jetpacks, but sadly weren't used anywhere else to my knowledge. Plus, the Rebels camo changes to match the color of the planet across all units with the exception of the officer class, which keeps the same outfit on all other planets except Hoth. But in some of the game's cutscenes and hidden in the files is an Endor and Death Star 2 skin respectively that was never used for some reason. And the Dracelian head also only appears in the campaign. Also, the two legions DICE created created for the Republic only have a Phase 2 variant available in the game, but Phase 1 versions for both these legions do exist in the game's code. This is also the case for some hero skins as well. Most of Kylo Ren's hoodless Episode 7 skins are locked away, and Luke's black suit from Endor is only available in Battlefront 1, while the sequel uses his black robes from Tatooine. Speaking of which, game modes from Battlefront 1 like the Space to Ground Scarif map weren't ever included in the game. Although Capital Supremacy is kinda like the Death Star DLC, we never got the Starfighter phase since we're automatically transported to the capital ship. That's because the live dev team had nothing to do with the space battle gameplay post-launch since Criterion developed it, making it harder to change and tamper with, so there was never really any plans to add new content for the space battle side of the game. Which is a shame since there's even unused ships like the A-Wing from Battlefront 1 and the gunships for the CIS, Republic, and Empire that are just static models with no class of their own. Plus, some limited time game modes like Ewok Hunt became permanent additions to the game's lineup due to popularity. But Jetpack Cargo was also a highly requested game mode that never made a return because apparently it was way too buggy for some reason. And with the small dev team and time restraints, they decided to prioritize other things instead. But apparently, just like in the original games, they created generic Jedi models for internal testing versions of the game, but in another dev jam, they tested a game mode on Kashyyyk where you play as a group of 4 generic Jedi fighting off waves of AI enemies as you make your way from the beach shoreline to the ship extraction zone. And each Jedi only had one Force ability. If they had more time to refine this idea, it's crazy to think we could have gotten an Order 66 style game mode or something similar, which probably would have been a fan favorite in co-op or instant action. You probably noticed that the weapon class system is very limited in Battlefront 2, having a default blaster per faction and 3 customizable weapons per class that are also sometimes duplicates. Meaning some weapons like the DC-15A and E5 for the prequel factions are non-customizable since they're both only default guns, giving them a clear disadvantage. Although I couldn't find an exact quote, I do remember them saying they wanted to eventually do a weapon rework where all the factions' default guns are available as customizable weapons and merge together the ones that already had this option. But sadly, weapons were low on their priority list since we only ever got 4 new guns throughout the live service support. And features like aiming down sights, which was in the first Battlefront game, never made it over to the sequel for some reason. Speaking of which, you're probably wondering why they never added all the DLC heroes from the first game. Not only would it overcrowd the original trilogy hero pool, which already had the most amount of content at launch, but DICE wanted heroes to be more easily identifiable compared to regular units. Which is also why General Hux wasn't added or Stormtrooper Han and Luke skins, even though it would have been easy to include. And since some of the alien hero heads were added as customizable items for the rebels, it would have only made it worse. Sadly though, hero guards from Battlefront 1 apparently were too problematic to work in with Battlefront 2's reinforcement system. But these and other unused skins could have eventually made their way into the game as new reinforcements, kinda like how they were used in the challenge missions in the first game. But like with most other features, that's if they had more time. Apparently they had so much other plans like crossplay and even a prestige system where you can trade in the max level for a blue icon and then green, etc. So although one more extra year of development could have grown Battlefront 2 into the ultimate Star Wars game, there's still a lot of hidden secrets in the content we did end up getting, especially in the clone skins. Find out more in this video here.